All right. Hi, guys. Chapter 6. So, this is our very first topic in microeconomics. From now on, we're focused on micro topics only, and we're going to start with this chapter, elasticity, and the concept of elasticity, which is kind of related to what we had in chapter 3. We will talk about four different types of elasticity in this chapter, and we're going to be focused more on one type of elasticity, which is called price elasticity of demand. We do have other elasticities that are called price elasticity of supply, income elasticity, and cross elasticity. They are all related to chapter 3. So if you don't remember demand and supply, law of demand, law of supply, substitute complementary goods, I definitely encourage you guys to review chapter 3 before you start chapter 6, okay? Um, the job of elasticity in general is to tell us basically how the consumers or producers are basically reacting to the changes in price or to the changes of income. Okay. And the elasticity is able actually to measure the changes in quantity when there is a change in price or when there is a change in income. That's the job of elasticity. So let's just start with price elasticity of demand. And keep in mind that I'm going to skip those parts that are related to calculating price elasticity of demand and also one kind of technique we have, which is called total revenue test. I'm going to skip those because I do have other videos for you where I explain the step by step how you can calculate them by doing an example. So definitely watch those videos. But I just wanted to kind of spend some time talking about the concept of price elasticity of demand. Supply is very, very similar to price elasticity of demand and the two other elasticities. Okay. So if you remember in chapter 3, we talked about law of demand. And law of demand, let me go back here and see if I can write on this. Um, Slide here. Okay. So if you remember, the law of demand was about the relationship between price and quantity demanded, right? And there was a negative relationship between these two. So if price goes up, quantity demanded will go down, and vice versa. If price goes down, quantity demanded will go up. The price elasticity of demand is going to measure how much the quantity demanded is going up or down when there is a change in price. Same thing applies to price elasticity of supply. If you remember, according to law of supply, there was a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. The job of price elasticity of supply is to measure the amount of change in quantity supplied when there is a change in price. Okay, so that's the concept of basically price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, measuring the amount of change in quantity demanded or quantity supplied when there is a change in price. Okay. In the other word, the price elasticity of demand, let's say, because we're focusing on price elasticity of demand, is to basically see how sensitive the buyers are to changes in price. Okay. Or for the case of price elasticity of supply, the price elasticity of supply measures basically how sensitive the suppliers are to changes in price. Okay. Um, so let me go back to my slides. Um, and let me show you again the definition that I just talking about. Okay. Um, my video, again, I explained how you can measure it. I'm just going to go over the formulas quickly when I'm done talking about what we mean by elastic demand and inelastic demand, okay? But make sure to check those videos. So we're talking about how sensitive the buyers are to changes in price here, right? So if our buyers are super sensitive to price changes, you change the price by X%, but you see a dramatic change in your quantity. The quantity changes by more than X%. Okay, we say that the buyers are sensitive to price changes. We say that the demand here is elastic. Okay, so if buyers are sensitive and to changes in price, and if you see a huge change in quantity, when you have a small change in your price, we say that the demand is elastic. Typically, we say elastic demand for those goods and services that that do have so many substitute. Okay, let's say restaurant meals. If the menu changes, if the prices, let's say, go up at your favorite restaurant, you can basically switch restaurant. You can eat at home, or you can go to fast food. So you have so many alternatives, so many options. Or chocolate, if one brand becomes more expensive, you still have options, you still have alternatives, right? So your demand for chocolate, for restaurant meals, for bread, your demand is basically elastic. If you are not that sensitive to price changes, if price changes by X%, but your quantity actually is changing by less than X%, it means that the buyers are not really that sensitive to price changes, and simply because they do not have that many options, they do not have so many alternatives, so their demand is inelastic. Like toothpaste, the price changes, you still need to brush your teeth, so your quantity actually is not going to change that much. Let's say toothpaste becomes more expensive, the price goes up by 1%. Your quantity definitely will go down because of law of demand, that inverse relationship between price and quantity, but the change in quantity is not really that significant because you still need the toothpaste. Same thing for insurance, health insurance, same thing for salt, for water. Okay, they all have inelastic demand. Okay, um, we have two formulas here for price elasticity of demand, and this is the part that I want you to basically watch my other video to see how we can basically calculate the elasticity. But we have two formulas, and also know the abbreviations we have for different types of elasticity in this chapter. ED stands for price elasticity of demand. ES stands for price elasticity of supply. EI stands for income elasticity, and EXY stands for cross elasticity. So this is the formula. Percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price will give you the elasticity. And we also have another formula, which is called midpoint formula, that typically we use when we want to calculate the elasticity, which is kind of a little bit bigger than the first one. And you should take more steps to calculate the elasticity, but I promise you it's really, really easy. Is the change in quantity divided by the sum of two quantities. Basically, you are taking the average of your quantities at the bottom, and then you are dividing the whole thing by changing price, the difference between the two prices you have, by the sum of prices divided by two, or again, the average of two prices. We call this formula midpoint or average, okay? And this is the most common way of calculating the elasticity. On the test, on the homework, I will tell you which formula to use, but if you look at the examples, you kind of know when you should use the midpoint formula and when you should use the first formula that I showed you. Okay, so these are the formulas, but let me tell you how you can read your calculation. Let's say you are done with calculating the elasticity, and then your price elasticity of demand is 1.2, or the price elasticity is 0.75. What does it mean? So first of all, remember that the price elasticity of demand, because of law of demand, is always negative. Of course, when you use a midpoint formula, you can always play around with your numbers and end up with a positive number at the end, because you are using the averages at the bottom for your changing quantity and changing your price, basically ratios here. So you can actually play around and have a positive number at the end. But in general, the price elasticity of demand is negative because of law of demand. But remember that you should always drop your negative sign and look at the absolute value, because you are going to compare your answers and your calculations with number one. If you keep the negative sign, then your your whatever number you are coming up with is always less than one, suggesting that your demand is inelastic, meaning that the buyers are not sensitive to price changes. That might not be necessarily true. So the very first thing you do is to drop the negative sign and look at the absolute value, and then compare your calculations with number one. If your price elasticity is greater than one, your demand is elastic. It means that the buyers are sensitive to changes in price. It means that the change in quantity is big, bigger than the changes in price. If it's less than one, your demand is inelastic. And rarely you can have at demand, price elasticity of demand equal to one, it means that the demand is unit elastic. We rarely have a unit elastic demand. What does it say? It means that the percentage change in price is exactly the same as the percentage change in your quantity. Your price is going up or down by X percent, and your quantity is also going up or down by exactly X percent. So the amount of change in price is the same as the amount of change in your quantity. We also have two extreme cases where the elasticity is zero or infinity. And whenever we have these extreme cases, we no longer have a downward slope demand. In perfectly inelastic demand, where the elasticity is zero, if you look at the formula, the first formula that I showed you, and again, I explained it in my video, my other videos, you can see that the percentage change in quantity actually is zero because we had it at the top of the ratio. So you are dividing zero by anything at the bottom, it will give you zero mathematically, right? But what does it mean? Perfectly inelastic demand. Perfectly inelastic demand is suggesting that the price is changing in the market, but the quantity is fixed. So no matter what the price is in the market, people are buying the same amount of product. They don't really care about the price at all. And it's true actually for many medication for patients, like insulin for diabetic patient. No matter what the price is, the patients rely on the same dosages of insulin, right? So instead of having a downward slope demand, we have a vertical demand because the quantity is fixed. Look at the graph here. Your Q is fixed, but prices can go up or down, but you keep buying the same amount of product. So the elasticity here is zero. So you have a vertical demand, okay? Same thing for perfectly elastic demand. We do no longer have a downward slope demand, but for perfectly elastic, and the elasticity is infinity. So suggesting that the price this time is fixed. So we have a horizontal demand. We really don't have a real life example for perfectly elastic demand because you cannot really find any product that the price is fixed and people keep buying and buying more and more of this product to the infinity. We really don't have such a product. So um, just remember the shape, but really we don't have an example, okay? But whenever the price elasticity is infinity, we say that the um, demand is perfectly elastic. We're going to use it actually in future chapters, okay? But for now, we're just going over the concept, all right? So one way of calculating and figuring out the elasticity is using the formulas that I showed you, like midpoint formula or the first formula, which was the percentage change in quantity divided by percentage change in price. But there's also another way of calculating elasticity, and it's called total revenue. Again, watch the video. I solved this little example for you using the example and using this total revenue concept. But in general, the total revenue tells you, can tell you about the elasticity of demand. Okay. First of all, this is the formula we have. If you multiply price by quantity, you can get the total revenue. And if you figure out the relationship between price and your total revenue, you can tell uh, if the demand is elastic, inelastic, or even unit elastic, okay? If the price and total revenue move in the same direction, meaning that they are both going up or down, then your demand is inelastic. If the price and total revenue move in the opposite direction, let's say price is going up, your total revenue is going down, or the price is decreasing, your total revenue is going up, then the demand is elastic. And if the price goes up or down and your total revenue doesn't change, then your demand is unit elastic. You can also check out this little graph that I have here. So let's say the price is $2. When the price is 2, the quantity is 10. So 2 times 10 will give you the total revenue. So this yellow area is your total revenue, which is $20. And now let's say the price is going down to $1. So the total revenue will be $40, as you can tell, because total revenue is price times Q, so quantity. So 1 times 40 is $40. So price is decreasing from 2 to 1, but what is happening to your total revenue? Your total revenue is increasing from $20 to $40. So price and total revenue are moving in the opposite direction. So you can tell that the demand is elastic here. You can basically look at the graph here, and you can tell that price and um, total revenue are moving in the same direction. So your demand is inelastic. Okay. So total revenue when the price is 3.5 is 35. The price is going down to 1. So your total revenue is also going down to $20. So they're moving in the same direction. They're both decreasing. So our demand is inelastic. For unit elastic, then the price is $3 in this example. The total revenue is $30. If the price goes down to 1, your total revenue is again $30. So your total revenue didn't change. However, the price went down, suggesting that the demand is unit elastic. Okay. So that was pretty much it about the price elasticity of a demand. Now let me go quickly over price elasticity of supply, which is very, very similar to price elasticity of demand. For price elasticity of supply here, we're trying to measure how much the quantity supplied is changing when there is a change in price and how sensitive our suppliers are to changes in price. The concept is very similar to price elasticity of demand. Again, if the suppliers are very sensitive to changes in price, the supply is elastic. If they are not sensitive to price changes, supply is inelastic. But just look at the examples that I put here. I kind of use the kind of similar examples, but I'm just changing the time because time is the most important determinant of price elasticity of supply. Because remember that we have different time periods in microeconomics, like short run, long run. We also have, we probably heard about it, immediate short run. So they can impact the magnitude of our price elasticity of supply. So time is the key basically element in price elasticity of supply. The calculation of price elasticity of supply is similar to price elasticity of demand. So the formulas are exactly the same. We have again percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. And we again have the midpoint formula. Instead of quantity demanded, we have quantity supplied. But again, we're taking the averages of our quantity supplied and our prices. We are not going to deal with the negative kind of sign discussion we had for price elasticity of demand because the result from our calculation for price elasticity of supply is always positive because of the law of supply and the positive relationship between price and quantity supply we discussed in chapter 3. So again, you are going to compare your positive answers with number 1. If it's greater than 1, supply is elastic, less than 1 inelastic, equal 1 unit elastic. We only have one extreme case for price elasticity of supply, and that's perfectly inelastic supply, where the quantity supplied again is fixed no matter what's happening to our price. So instead of upward slope supply, we have a vertical supply. We do not have a perfectly elastic supply like demand. And again, we didn't have a real life example even for perfectly elastic demand, but we're just introduced that concept because we're going to need it in future chapters. Okay, that's the only reason we had that. Now let's talk a little bit about time. So we have 3 different time periods in microeconomics that are going to impact our price elasticity of supply. We have immediate, Market, we have short run and long run. Typically, when we say short run, we mean less than 6 months. Long run is more than 6 months. Immediate market is right now. Okay. So, depending on how much time the producers and suppliers basically have, they are going to respond to the changes in the market. If we're talking about immediate market, basically, businesses, producers do not have enough time to respond to the changes in the market. So, no matter what's happening to the price in the market, the quantity that they can supply in the market is fixed, completely fixed. That's why in the immediate market, we have a vertical supply. The supply is perfectly inelastic, okay? So the elasticity is zero here for our supply. So it doesn't really matter what's happening to the demand in the market going up or down, since the quantity is fixed. Businesses cannot really do anything about their quantity because simply they do not have enough time to change their quantity because we're talking about right now. So even if the demand increases, we learned in chapter 3, if supply is fixed and demand increases, the price will go up. But because of the unique shape of supply here, quantity is not going to change. So businesses are going to make money because of the change in price here, but their margins are very, very small because the quantity didn't change. The quantity, or in the other words, the supply didn't really respond to the changes in demand. Okay, let me go back. Short run. In short run, businesses definitely have more time compared to the immediate market to respond to the changes in the market, but still they do not have enough time to make big investments in the short run. So short run is risky. We're talking about less than 6 months. So businesses do not want to basically expand in the short run. The only thing that they're going to change in the short run typically is labor, but they're not going to change their location. They're not going to buy more capital because again, we're talking about short run. Supply definitely is more elastic in the short run compared to the immediate market. Um, but it is not as elastic as the supply in the long run, because in the long run we can change anything and everything in terms of the resources we have. We're talking about more than 6 months. The risk is low. The businesses can purchase more capital. They can change the land, their location. They can change the number of workers they hire. So we are talking about kind of the times that the risk is low. So businesses can basically expand in the long run. So in the immediate market, the supply is perfectly inelastic. Okay. There is no way for businesses to respond to the changes in the market. We have more elastic supply in the short run compared to the immediate market, but we definitely have the most elastic supply in the long run because of the flexibility that businesses have in the long run in terms of changing their resources. Okay, so this was the perfectly inelastic supply. Supply was vertical. Let's look at the short run. In the short run, we have a typical shape of upward slope supply, but as you can see, our supply is kind of steep here, right? So if the demand changes, there will be a change in quantity, but look at the amount of change in quantity is not that significant, right? So definitely we have elastic supply, but the changes in quantity is small because we are talking about short run. Let's compare it with long run. This is our long run. It's more elastic compared to short run. Demand is changing, demand is going up, but the amount of changing quantity is bigger compared to the short run, right? So definitely businesses can make more money in the long run compared to short run, obviously, right? Because the supply is more elastic. In this kind of example, when the demand, of course, is going up, if the demand decreases, that's a different story. They're going to lose money. But anyhow, as you can see, time is very important to businesses in terms of price elasticity of supply. And time is basically the key for businesses in the um, um, in terms of price elasticity of supply and the magnitude of price elasticity of supply. The calculation was exactly the same. by the way. The third elasticity we have is EXY, or cross elasticity, which is again related to chapter 3. In chapter 3, we talked about related goods. We talked about substitute and complementary goods. So cross elasticity is related to basically those two concepts of substitute and complementary. This is the formula we have. Unlike price elasticity of demand and price elasticity of supply, we only have one formula for cross elasticity and the next elasticity, which is called income elasticity. So percentage change in quantity demanded for product X, it could be your coffee, divided by percentage change in the price of product Y, it could be your tea, or X can be your coffee, Y can be your cream. Substitute, complementary, okay? Cross elasticity tells you basically how sensitive the consumers are to the changes in the price of related goods, okay? So if the price of good Y changes by X%, you can measure how much the quantity for product X as a substitute or complementary, as a related good actually in general is gonna change, okay? For cross elasticity and income elasticity, the only thing we care about is the sign. Remember that for demand and supply, we were just focused on comparing our results, our calculation with number one. We dropped the negative sign for price elasticity of demand. We were not worried about the sign for price elasticity of supply. We compared our answers with number one. For both cross elasticity and income elasticity, however, the only thing that we care about is the sign, because the sign of cross elasticity and income elasticity can tell us the type of product that we're dealing with. If we figure out the sign of cross elasticity here, we can tell if X and Y are substitute or they are complementary, okay? So, and you will see that in the examples, I'm not going to ask you to calculate the elasticity, cross elasticity, or income elasticity. The only thing that we are trying to figure out is if X and Y are substitute or if they are complementary. So there's no really calculation here. You should just figure out the sign, okay? So if the cross elasticity is, it's a sign of cross elasticity is positive, it means that X and Y are substitute. If the cross elasticity is negative, it means X and Y are complementary. And remember, just like chapter 3, we said most of the goods and services we do know are not related at all. They're independent. So the elasticity for them will be 0. Of course, I'm not going to give you any 0 for the test. So it's either positive or negative. Okay. So remember that if it's positive, substitute. If it's negative, X and Y are complementary. Now let's talk about income elasticity. Income elasticity is our last elasticity, is EI. EI stands for income elasticity. It tells us how sensitive the buyers or the consumers are to changes in income. Okay, so in chapter 3, when we talked about demand, income was one of the determinants of demand, one of the factors that could shift our demand, remember? So we had normal goods, we had inferior goods. So the sign of income elasticity here can tell us if the product here we're talking about is normal or inferior, because income elasticity can measure the amount of change in our quantity when there is a change in income. Okay, so if the income elasticity is positive, then the product that we're talking about is normal. And it kind of matches with how I define normal goods in chapter 3. For normal goods, if your income increases, your demand will go up for them. If your income decreases, your demand for normal goods will go down. So EI is positive when your product is normal, right? And if it's negative, your EI, then the product is inferior. Inferior goods, if you remember from chapter 3, are those goods that their income and your demand for them move in the opposite direction. If you have more income, your demand for inferior good like ramen noodles will go down, or for used clothing will go down. Again, remember that we're not talking about if you love ramen or not. we are talking about one factor at a time, income only. So we're not talking about your preferences or your taste. Just a reminder that how we talked about determinants of demand in chapter 3. Okay, so again, the only thing we care about even for income elasticity is the sign. If it's positive, we're talking about normal goods. If it's negative, we're talking about inferior goods. All right, so that's pretty much it for this chapter. There are some questions on the homework or even for the test that will be about calculating elasticity. So have some practice. Make sure you know how to calculate them. Remember, you can have all the formulas ready in front of you at the time of the test, but just make sure you know how to use them and have a calculator ready. All right. Hope you find it helpful. I'll see you soon.